comes to Europe in particular, what are some of the very specific backhaul challenges, or even just small cells challenges, that you feel operators experience in Europe that might be different from the rest of the world?
Okay, well, in contrast to, let's say, the Far East, where there's a huge amount of fibre and we've seen small cell deployments that are very heavily fibre-based, I think in Europe we're going to see wireless technologies really play the primary role in small cell backhaul. And there was a recent Infonetic survey where I think 81% of operators agreed with that statement and said that wireless was the primary small cell backhaul solution. So if you think about wireless, then really the amount of capacity that you can get is strongly determined by the frequency band that you use. And this is summarised again in the small cell forum backhaul white paper. But we see that just as in macro backhaul, it's really the microwave, so above 6 gigahertz, and the millimetre wave, so above 30 gigahertz solutions, they're going to be the workhorses of small cell backhaul, just as they have been in macro backhaul.
Okay, so I mean, I see that you mentioned millimetre wave, so that's also quite a new topic this year. I mean, do you see millimetre wave, replacing microwave, or will it be complementing it? Is this the way forward?
Yeah, it's a good question. I definitely see them as being complementary solutions. The real issue at the moment for millimetre wave is that the systems are very expensive. So there was a recent report by Maravida's Rethink where they looked at the costs of millimetre wave radios versus microwave radios, and currently a millimetre wave radio is about twice the price of a microwave radio. So if you're worrying about building sites with 10% of the cost, then that's not a good direction to go in currently. Now, there's good reductions in those prices forecast, but that's still just a forecast. So that's a real opportunity for microwave multi-point systems, because they already have those low TCOs that operators are looking for, without a kind of jam tomorrow approach to pricing reductions.
When you work with different regions, with different operators from different regions, does the way you work differ from maybe, say, in Latin America to, say, Europe?
Yeah, well, so historically we've done a lot of work in emerging markets with operators, and one of the attractions for an operator in an emerging market for our kind of technology is that it does enable them to make significant TCO savings. And for those operators, it's always been a bit of a stretch to try and make the business case for the entire network work. So they've always been very innovative in looking for new solutions that can deliver backhaul bits at the lowest cost per bit. So for markets like Latin America and Africa and the Middle East, where small cell deployments are really coming along actually very quickly, following fast on the heels of North America and Western Europe, we're seeing very significant interest in PMP solutions for those small cell backhaul opportunities.
So how does that vary when it comes to Europe? I mean, is it slightly different?
Yes, I mean, I think we will see different solutions becoming more prevalent in various parts of the world. So, for example, in the Far East, we mentioned the strong prevalence of fibre means that wireless overall takes a lower share. I think in Europe, there's very good harmonisation, for example, of point-to-multipoint spectrum, so there's a good opportunity there. That's not true in North America, unfortunately. So you can see that there are kind of regulatory differences that will have strong effects on which solutions will be the preferred solutions of operators.
So what about when it comes to backhaul and basically putting in backhaul for small cells, and how that sort of works together with legacy networks? I mean, do they end up sharing the backhaul?
It's something not many people have talked about actually, so it's a really good question, but there's obviously a benefit if you can share the backhaul between the macro network and the small cell network. One thing that we have seen people talk about doing is using kind of macro sites as like a point of presence, because typically you may have some kind of fibre backhaul point there. And you can then use a solution like microwave PMP or millimetre wave to backhaul a bunch of small cells to that point of presence, and then kind of piggyback on the macro cells fibre into the core network. And that again is a way of sharing out the cost between the small cell layer and the macro layer that again will help the TCO model for the operators. What
do you think operators are most worried about right now when it comes to small cell deployments?
Well, that's a great question. I think the focus has shifted a bit. There was it's one of the kind of survey questions that comes up from time to time, and I think last year the number one answer was backhaul is the biggest problem. I think the perspective has really shifted now, partly because of work the Small Cell Forum has done and the NGMN has done. But now I think the biggest problem that operators perceive is site acquisition, and that's traditionally been the biggest problem for macro networks anyway. And I think that's really because of this perception that the backhaul barrier has been broken by all the great technologies and innovation that are available for small cell backhaul today.